Thank you, Cathaoirleach, and I also want to thank everyone that spoke today, and I suppose that it's so important that we highlight that the issues that are facing, in particular child poverty, it's absolutely, I don't know, it's really hard to think of children in child poverty. And I know in my own area in Carlow, I would have been very much involved with a group of people that we set up our own food bank, but we call it St. Clair's Hospitality. And we give up to 80 meals a day. Now, during COVID, we had to get buy-in meals, but we actually give at least 80 meals a day. But apart from that, we give out a lot of food parcels. So I would actually see it firsthand myself. Families. Now, I would say families that are working, that are paying their bills and find it very hard to survive at the end of the week when they have absolutely nothing left and they would look for a food parcel. So we have to be very careful too that there is situations where family are working, by the time they finish they absolutely have nothing left, particularly when they pay their bills. And I think we always, are mindful of that. But I just even looking at, I'll go to St. Vincent de Paul, where they have said in their statement that in 2021, the regional office received over 191 requests for help, and almost 70% of those requests were from families with children. But do you think that's an accurate figure? Because I believe, working within the community, that there's families out there with children that need support and they don't go look for it. Do you feel that is an issue, or do you come across that often? The other area I want to talk about is child supports, and we spoke about domestic violence has been, very much part of the last few weeks, highlighted the way, and we need to highlight it, domestic violence in the home. And I believe that there should be more supports for children that are in a situation like that, that we need to get supports in play, whether it's through school, whether it's through the families or whatever, that there is supports there for children that are affected by this, because this does affect them really, in the sense that, are there enough counselling services there? Are they getting the support? Are we missing children in the system that need these supports, but we're not aware of them? And I know I would have brought this up. I actually went to the minister on this, and I've been calling for this for the last maybe 8 months or a year. In my own area again, where I know families that have left schools because they don't qualify for the DESH status, and they actually, there's no hot meals programme in it, or there's no breakfast club in it. And I now know of families that are actually sending their children to school where they can actually access hot meals. And I think we are now living in a society that if we don't make sure, and I've been calling for this, that all schools, whether you're DESH, whether you're not, look, we're waiting for the last, for months and months and months now on the review from the minister on the DESH status again, because I know myself from different schools, they have applied to the minister for to be part of the DESH status because they're in what, as we know, disadvantaged areas. But of course we can't get it. Look, there has been no report on that yet, but I will keep working and constantly keep on to the minister about this. But I think no matter what area you're in, every school now needs to look at hot schools meals, because there is families definitely out there that cannot afford to, if they're paying a bill, or as you said, they make sacrifices for themselves. But at least if they know their child is in a school where there's a hot meals programme or a breakfast programme, they are being fed. And I think everybody has to get it. I feel that's important, that no child feels that they're the exception to get food when others aren't getting it. So I think we have to be really mindful of that. And I just want to talk about lone parents, and I would have huge issues with the fact that local authorities are not building 2-bedroom houses. So the biggest issue I feel when parents come to me, or a lone parent comes to me, and they're on the local authority housing list and they're paying their HAP, and they're doing their best, and then you're saying to them, look, we have no 2-bed houses at the moment. So I think we definitely need to get all the different agencies working together. We need joint up thinking, but we need to make sure we're building houses, because you don't want children in flats or rented, like we all see with the HAP now. If you're in HAP or you're renting a house, I mean, within 3 months, if the house has been sold, they can become homeless. So I think we need to get more security for one-parent families, and I think we definitely need to work with other areas and get that joint up thinking there. Look, I know myself, and I'm sure all of us, the rest of us here know, it's after been very hard. And I think the only thing what COVID has done is that it's highlighted the failings within our system. And it's highlighted things maybe that weren't highlighted enough. But I think it's sad in 2022 that we have food banks and we have, like in my own area, St. Clair's Hospitality, because we really should have no one in poverty. And I think definitely it should be. And I know that we need to make this a priority for the government. And thanks to everyone.
Thanks, Deputy. I'm actually going to start with Ms Johnson first in relation to the food queries, and then we'll go to Vincent de Paul and then one family. So Ms Johnson, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, we see a wider variety perhaps of people now accessing the food bank compared to at the very beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. We've only been involved in food banks since the end of March 2020. And that is that not that there were not families where people were working or people had a mortgage before, but there's a larger proportion of them now. And they come to us and they say, we paid our bills. We had a young couple recently. The husband's money goes to the rent, her money goes to the bills. There is nothing left for food. They don't have children, but that is their situation. If they had children, it might be even worse. We have families, they pay their mortgage, and they have nothing left. What we're seeing is these people, some of these people have never had to look for help before. So they find it very difficult, first maybe just to ask for help, but then to actually find it. So they've never looked for help in the case of the food, but also maybe mental health issues or parenting issues. They've never had to look for help before, and especially when the schools were closed, or when the children were taught at home through Zoom and that. It was very difficult for some parents, and they would come to us perhaps and say, I've never had to look for help before, and now I do, and I find it a labyrinth. I find it very difficult to find help. That's certainly true. Another thing, if I may, that has affected people that come to the food bank because of COVID-19 is the delay in social welfare payments, the delay in the registration of children, leading to the delay of children's allowance or medical card. And we have families that they just had a bill from the hospital for their baby. They paid the bill because they always pay all their bills, and now they have no money left. They didn't have to pay the bill, but they didn't know that because they've never had to worry about that much before. Or in the case of, say, young adults who aren't age 24 yet, they can't get the full social welfare payment automatically. There are ways around that, but it takes a long time, much longer now. So we have one young adult accessing us. He has €112 a week. He's still living in the family home. His parents are dead in the last 2 years. He has support trying to help him resolve these issues, but it's taking time. And that is time that you don't necessarily have when you need food or you need to pay your heating bill. And we are seeing more of that. We are. Thank you.
Dr. Keelty?
Thank you. Rose, do you want to come in here maybe and just the type of requests we're getting in relation to food and things like that?
Okay, Tricia, thanks. Yeah, I would totally agree. While they're the number of calls we have received, I would also totally agree that there are a lot of people who did not access or would not phone us or feel they just cannot take that last step to make that phone call. And even though in any radio or newspaper interview we've done over the COVID times about COVID, we've made sure to say the only criteria for our help is need, and please come and don't be afraid to come. But there will be always people who are not comfortable coming to the Vincent de Paul. I think living in poverty is much bigger than our 190,000 calls, you know. As regards the food, I totally agree with you about the DESH schools. I myself have spoken to people who moved their children or enrolled their children in a DESH school, not just about the free meals, but because classroom sizes are smaller, there's other supports in those schools. So I think that whole thing needs to be looked at, you know. As regards the food, we had a call, just an example, before Christmas from a homeschool liaison teacher who we worked really closely with schools, and the homeschool liaison system is wonderful. But she had 12 families, and this is in a DESH school. She had 12 families who would not access help through us. They just said all the neighbours would know, etc., etc. And we just put 12 bags of food into the boot of our car, delivered them to the school with toys and other books and other things. And it was operated through that system in confidence, and we said, look, in the new year, you need to sit with those families. Because you can't visit houses, what she was operating during the year is 1 day a week. She would have families in the school. The other days she couldn't visit their houses. So she's going to kind of work with those families to say, look, there's lots of ways of getting support, even if you don't want us to come. Our resource centres, where we would have childcare facilities, it shows how important childcare is, because they trust those teachers in our childcare facilities and resource centres, and they build up that rapport. So, in fact, they can access a lot more things because of that. And our teachers would refer them to us, would explain what our conference, who our branches would do, and whether that is about food or school or whatever, So I do believe there's huge people living in poverty, and it is not, as you say, it's not always social welfare recipients. We've had the first full lockdown, people that were working had some savings, and they used all those savings. There's no savings now. So in fact, we've had recently a couple, both working, both lost their jobs, one in hospitality and both in low pay, got the PUP payment, for which they were grateful for. A 2-bedroom cottage in Dublin inner city, 1,800 a month. That had to be paid first, and then their bills. And they came wondering, would we have food? 2 people who have been working. And obviously we said, of course, come to the food bank, and we did help with a bill, etc., etc. But that girl, no children, that girl didn't realise we would help with, say, an electric bill. Now, that's something for us to look at as well, that people would know, we would try and get out more what we do. But, she decided to do an online course during COVID and kind of upskill. We helped with the purchase of a laptop. And that girl came at Christmas to the food bank to collect, because we were doing food plus a Christmas food. She came with a box of chocolates, so grateful that kind of we had supported them. They'd kept their home, they'd kept their bills going. And now, hopefully, after last Friday's announcement, they will be both back at work. But it is people in work at the moment. It is not just all social welfare recipients,
Very much for that, Ms. McGowan. Ms. Kelly or Ms. Kiernan from One Parent, whoever wants to come in on this one.
Yeah, I'm just going to speak briefly, and then Niamh is going to take over, if that's okay, Chair. I just want to address your question, Deputy Murnane-O'Connor, about family supports and domestic violence. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say there's a crisis in this country for children and their parents around domestic abuse and child abuse and the impact on them. And we're learning things now that will haunt us in decades to come, I can tell you, in terms of the impact on children. It is incredibly insufficient what is there. Again, just to mention that very comprehensive child poverty paper that the Council on Bob F did. There are 11 different areas of concern, and one of them is on family support, and there is a reason for that, such as Karen explained earlier. We look at our social welfare rates compared to other countries, they can seem high, but our universal services are very, very low. So people in this country have to pay privately for so many things. So the importance of prevention and early intervention, the importance of family support services, particularly for families experiencing domestic abuse, is so critical. And even though we work with one-parent families, people are sharing parenting post-domestic violence, and then it's continuing through into contact visits and into sharing. So there's ongoing abuse and damage sometimes being done to children and their parents through, and that's maybe to do with family law reform, and we could talk about that another day. But this is linked to poverty as well, for sure. So I just want to hand over to Niamh after saying that. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Deputy Murnane-O'Connor, just to address a couple of the other areas that you mentioned around the hot school meals programme. And I would agree that, you know, it should be available more widely, and that it's such a key way to tackle food poverty in the families that we work with. I think that what you mentioned about the DESH schools is key, and this relates to not just hot school meals, but to all supports offered through DESH. We know that so many children, more than half the children who are experiencing disadvantage, aren't in a DESH school, so they don't have access to those supports. And we would like to see a system that follows the child, so that the children who are disadvantaged but are in a non-DESH school would still have access to those supports. We would like to see that schools who don't have cooking facilities are able to access the National Development Plan to retrofit their schools and to get better cooking facilities and dining facilities. And the introduction of a hot school meal programme in a school has a twofold effect on food poverty, because children are getting fed in school, but they're also maybe able to participate in the preparation of food, and they're able to see the preparation of healthy food, and that has a kind of sustainable impact on food poverty. Just to mention what you said about local authority housing, the UN Rapporteur for Housing spoke last year in Ireland, and particularly mentioned and highlighted the impoverished living conditions of one-parent families. And it's something that is, in the last number of years, has become an increasingly big issue for the families that we're working with. They have lower rates of home ownership, but also then poorer quality of housing. One area that, and also to mention that in relation to the homeless figures, one-parent families feature very heavily. So they make up around 20 to 25% of all families in Ireland, but they, up until last summer, we know they represented around 50 to 60% of families living in homelessness. Something that I'd just like to highlight to the committee is that the figures on homelessness have not been disaggregated since last summer for 2 and 1 parent families. So that's something that is just leaving us a little bit blind in terms of the situation. It's something that we'd like to see change, and to see those figures go back to being divided and to show us the picture there for 1 parent families. One area in relation to housing that is actually, it's a blind spot in terms of housing, but it's actually a policy blind spot throughout the system, is in relation to shared parenting families. So we see families where there might not be a formal custody arrangement, but dad has has custody of the children for half the time, and enters into homeless accommodation but can't access appropriate accommodation for their children. So the same is true throughout the system, the housing system, that families where share parenting families find it very difficult to find to access housing that's suitable for the children for both parents. And that's really important to maintain that shared parenting relationship. So it's something throughout the system. As I say, shared parenting is very much a blind spot when it comes to housing, when it comes to social protection. In all areas, it's something that you're either in a one parent, you're either viewed as a lone parent, or you're viewed as a single adult. And that has detrimental effects for the children. In terms of housing policy, we would support what you say. We definitely need more local authority and improved housing body built accommodation. We'd really like to see a lack of reliance on or an over-reliance on the private rented sector to provide social housing. This is, again, a big problem for the families that we work with, because as we know, top-ups are an issue, and the rate of HAP doesn't always meet the full needs of a property. And for a family with one income, for a one-parent family trying to meet that top-up payment, it's an additional burden on that family that, again, they're further disadvantaged compared to two-parent families in that situation. So I suppose as as part of an overall child poverty strategy, we would also like to see, or linking in with that strategy, we would like to see a family homelessness strategy that addressed some of these concerns and addressed some of the issues arising for one-parent families, but that also, I suppose, spoke to and interacted with the child poverty strategy. So the two were aligned and the two were working towards the same goals on housing. So thank you.